Okay, good morning, everyone. I'll just introduce myself because not all of you know me. First of all, it's great to be back here with Kiki. London Network Church is our home church. Whether you like it or not, when you grow up as a Christian, that church that you grow up in is your home church. Wherever you may go, it's still your home church. And we joined here in 1990. I'd been a Christian for about 2 months, and we came over from the church we'd been going to in Streatham with Alex and Dorcas and his family, and Shelley and her family. So 3 families together, and it answered the question, why on earth was I going from Ealing to Streatham for church? And of course we ended up here. So this is where I grew up as a Christian, and then for 16 years of that time, I was treasurer, and it was a time of great abundance. We were really blessed in that time. In that time, the new part of the building was put up and everything else. And as I was coming up here today on the M3, because it takes about an hour to get from Farnham, we were talking about many things, but it just came to me, I mean, I'm sure it was God speaking, that the trouble with society today is that the pressure to have, we're a taking society, or society takes, it doesn't give. You know, the peer pressure on children to have the most modern phones and the most modern games. I mean, my grandson, for his birthday, now this isn't my youngest grandchildren, wanted a computer game, which I know is going to cost £50 or £60. He's going to spend loads and loads of time doing that instead of reading books or just being a little boy of 7 or 8, you know. And they've got to have the right clothes, right everything. The peer pressure to have everything is dramatic. And at the school where I'm chair of governors, we insist that the children must come in uniform because we know that with the range of incomes that our families have, some children are not going to be able to have the best trainers or the best this, the best that. So we make sure that there's a level playing field to the extent that if you come in trainers, we will give you a pair of shoes to put on so that you can't show off. And it's not about not wanting them to have the things, it's about remembering those that do not have the opportunity to have the things. So today, now I'm sure Pastor Alex will tell me if I overrun on time, because the clock's gone. Last time I was here, there was a clock there. It was easy, you just look there. I want to look at the challenge of sowing generously. In 2 Corinthians, verse 9-6, Paul says, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will reap generously. So take a bit of time to reflect on that. How do you sow? Are you a generous sower? Or are you someone that wants to keep everything to yourself, or for your family? You know, there's great joy in giving. There's also great joy in receiving. But if all you want to do is keep and receive, then you're not really fulfilling God's purpose, I don't think anyway. You know? So it probably helps if I give you a bit of my background. Some of you know this, so I was always in a very well-paid job. I always earned quite a lot of money. But that didn't stop me living above my means. As Shelley will attest, I was very much, in fact, I'll tell you a small story. We were in Barbados once, and we were staying in a hotel on the south coast. Shelley and her family were there, and we were there. And we came to check out. And I had to go to the toilet. And they'd started printing my bar bill when I went to the toilet. And I came back a few minutes later, because the toilet was at the other end, and it was still printing. and printing, and printing. And I looked at that and I thought, hey, well, this is only whatever it was. But I didn't think, well, this is really excessive. It was totally excessive. You know, completely ridiculous, because most of it was for virgin coladas, which is pina colada without the pina or whatever. Basically you pay the sum of the same sum for that without the rum as you do when it's got rum in it. And the children were drinking it like there was no tomorrow because they thought it was great, you know. So at $6 a time, it was quite a lot. And we were there for nearly 3 weeks, if I remember rightly. So, you know, but I always did live above my means for years and years and years and years and years. But because I was earning, I was able to borrow. We were tithing, so I felt great, you know, doing my tithing and everything else. But one day my accountant pointed out to me that I was spending slightly more than my income, and I had a big tax bill to pay, which I didn't have the money for, by the way. And so we did a budget, and on the budget, at the top, as you should in all good budgets, I had the tithe. And I pointed at that and said, well, that's going to have to go, Peter. Shelley knows Peter hella well. He was a Christian accountant. And he said, Glenn, even though it doesn't look possible to tithe, carry on. He didn't know how it worked, but in his experience, it did work. So I heard him, and I thought, well, that's interesting. But then after that, I made some even worse decisions about finances, and we stopped tithing because looking at the budget and everything else, we just couldn't afford it. Got into very serious debt. I had a credit line on my credit cards of £90,000, and I'd spent £63,000 of it. And one day, Kiki said, have you ever, you know, you're going to sit down and look at how much we owe? And it's then that I found out it was £63,000. So the first thing I did was get a pair of scissors and cut up most of the cards, except the one that we needed, just in case we needed a credit card. So I had a safety net, but I never used it, I don't think. And it took a little while to sort out, but we did sort it out. But the first thing we restored was tithing. At that stage, we did go back to tithing. We hadn't been tithing, but we did go back to it, and everything worked out. Now, I can't say that since then we've always tithed, because there have been occasions when we haven't. But that's not been because we don't want to or because we didn't have the money. It's been because, you know, it wasn't a priority for me. And looking now, I think tithing is a priority, but, you know, it's for each individual to decide. We'll talk about giving in a minute. So in the Old Testament, I'm going back to the Old Testament now, there are clear instructions on tithing given by the Lord to Moses in Leviticus 27, verses 30 to 34. And it says, a tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from the soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. If a man redeems any of his tithe, he must add a fifth of the value to it. The entire tithe of the herd and flock, every 10th animal that passes under the shepherd's rods, will be holy to the Lord. He must not pick out the good from the bad or make any substitution. If he does make a substitution, both the animal and its substitute become holy and cannot be redeemed. So that's what Leviticus says in the Old Testament. So that was in the laws passed down from Moses or through Moses. But what did Jesus say? That's what's more relevant to us nowadays, I think. And in Luke 6, verse 30, he writes, as I turn over this piece of paper. Sorry, one of my problems is I have carpal tunnel syndrome. Give to everyone who asks you. In verse 31, he says, do to others as you would have them do to you. And in chapter 14, verses 12 to 14, it says, then Jesus said to his host, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or relatives, or your rich neighbours. If you do, they may invite you back and say you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. And though they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. So he's saying, don't give to those that have. Remember the have-nots. It's very difficult. I mean, I used to work in central London, and when I worked in Tottenham Court Road, I'd get off the tube and walk up to Great Russell Street where I worked, and there would be chaps there, mainly men, normally with a dog, asking for money for food. Now, I also happen to know, because I've seen it happen many times, they'd take the money, wait till you're around the corner and nip into the off-licence just up the road and get a beer. But I would, if I was not in a hurry, I'd offer to buy them a McDonald's or Burger King or whatever was around, and know they'd rather have the money. Because it wasn't food they were after. They weren't after nourishment. They were after feeding their habits. In most cases, they were alcoholics, I think. And that's not to brush them all as alcoholics. I accept they're totally, genuinely homeless people, yeah? But it's hard to discern whether or not you're giving and helping, or whether you're giving and feeding an addiction, or what. But, just take a look at the circumstance. If someone asks you for food, don't deny them food, offer to go and get it for them, Try and help them. I did this. There was a chap at the garage when I worked in Canary Wharf. I used to drive in, and there was a chap that used to sit outside the garage where I got my petrol, and he'd ask for money for a sandwich. So the very last time I went into that garage, I said, "I'll get you a sandwich. What do you want?" And he told me what sandwich. He even told me where to find it on the shelf. And I was in the garage, and I was at the shelf finding his sandwich. He came in and said, "Oh, can you get me a bottle of Diet Coke as well, please?" So, which I did. I had no problem with it at all. But he really did want to eat, drink. He wasn't after money to take away and everything else, or he appeared to be. I noticed he was still there later when I was going home, so who knows. So, in Matthew 10:8, Jesus says, "Freely you have received, freely give." And, God blesses us all. I mean, we'll come to how much he blesses us later, I'm sure, but God blesses us all, and he gives to us freely. Is it not beholden on us to give freely out of that? So Matthew also gives us a warning in chapter 6, verses 1 to 4. So let's find Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 to 4. There he is. Got these nice little post-its in here to help me. "Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men, to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by men. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." And it's interesting, isn't it? We need to be very careful how we give. If you want to make a show of it, just be clear that that's what you're doing. You're doing it to look good rather than to help. Right? Now, helping will make you feel good. Helping without anyone knowing about it will make you feel even better. Trust me on that. I know a lot of people, including a few here, that have helped many people over the years, and no one will ever know about it. No one will ever know. But that's what giving to help is about. It's about helping the other person, not about glorifying yourself. So if we make a show of what we're doing, we're not glorifying God, we glorify ourselves. And a lot of wealthy people shout from the rooftops about how much they've given, and often have buildings or organisations named after themselves. It's true, isn't it? When you look at what goes on in the world, you know, you've got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They do fantastic work. They do absolutely phenomenal work. They've given billions away, you know. But why do we need to know that it was them that gave it? You know, you see newspaper appeals for various things, and the great and good with a lot of wealth give these appeals, and they appear on half the page of a newspaper saying this person has given this and boosted our fund. So what? It's great that they've given it, but why do we need to know it was them that gave it? We don't need to know. Why do they want us to know that they gave it? Because it makes them feel good. You know, they're taking the glory here, now, and the warning in Matthew says, be careful. You know, so do remember that, yeah? That, you know, if you're helping someone, do it quietly. Let them know that you're helping them, not by all means, but you don't need to tell anyone else. It really doesn't matter. You know, it's much more relevant, and you'll feel a lot better about it yourself. You'll feel very fulfilled, I can assure you. So in Mark 12, 41 to 44, this page here, there's an account of Jesus at the temple watching people put their money into the offering. Very relevant for a church, isn't it? In the NIV, it's headed the widow's offering. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins, worth only a fraction of a penny. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, I tell you the truth, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, putting in everything, all she had to live on. What faith she must have had. Can you imagine that? Getting your purse and emptying the last couple of coins into an offering at the temple? Must have been really, really difficult. And that would mean that she couldn't actually eat, I would have thought, unless she'd already brought her shopping early, of course. I don't know much about the supermarkets in 2,000 years ago. But, you know, she gave everything she had in faith. And it can be easier to give out of abundance. In fact, it is easier to give out of abundance. Trust me on that one. It's very much easier to give out when you've got an abundance. What's difficult is to give out sufficient when you've got an abundant amount of wealth. You know, because if you're just giving enough that you feel good about it, it's not having any impact on you in terms of your faith. You're given what you can afford or what you think you can afford, you know, and then you get in your private jet and stream off to Barbados or wherever, you know. We always went in the back of the big planes, jumbo jets. So if God has blessed you with excess wealth, it's always wise to consider why. And the question I'd ask is it so you can spend on your desires, or could it be that he trusts you to share your wealth as a have with those who have not? Does he trust you to share your wealth as a have with those who have not? And it can be a very hard decision to make. You know, in Mark 10, 17 to 24, Jesus tells the story of a rich young man. As Jesus started on his way, a man ran up to him and fell on his knees before him. Good teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Why do you call me good? Jesus answered. No one is good except God alone. You know the commandments. Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony, do not defraud, honor your father and mother. "Teacher," he declared, "all these I have kept since I was a boy." Jesus looked at him and loved him. "One thing you lack," he said. "Go sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." At this, the man's face fell. He went away sad because he had great wealth. Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, "How hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God." And think about it, the young man preferred his wealth to salvation. He had a direct invitation to become a disciple of Jesus. Give up all your wealth and follow me. But the pull of his wealth was too much. And I can understand that. I worked in investment banks for longer than I care to remember, about 12, 14, 15 years. And the wealth in investment banks with the people that work there can be phenomenal. When I worked at Lehman Brothers, on January the 26th, every year, the bonuses were paid to the bankers. And when we're talking about bonuses here, they'd range between 200,000 or 300,000 and 30 million pounds. Yeah. And around about 10 to 10, so they're paid over at 10 o'clock. They went into their bank accounts at 10 o'clock. At 10 to 10, if you looked out of the window, there was a row of Ferraris, Porsches, Maseratis, all sports cars outside with people holding the keys to them. At 10 o'clock, the lift doors would open and out would come the younger bankers normally, who would get them, ride them around the block, put them in the NCP and then come back in the building. But that's what they would do with the first part of their bonus. And they'd still have loads left. So they'd pay for the car in full, £200,000-300,000 car, and they'd still have thousands and thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds left. I remember one banker left because his bonus was only £4 million or something one year, and he was expecting 6 or something. So he moved to another bank. Utterly ridiculous. But very few of them were givers. They were mainly takers. They spent their money on luxuries. In the bar over the road from the Lehman Brothers building, they sold one champagne, which was something like £200 or £300 a bottle. And it was not unusual to see 5 or 6 bankers go in there and take 12 bottles in one session, It's just excessive, And at the time, I always wondered why. Having great wealth was something which I always thought when I was young was going to be nice, But I can tell you it's a burden. If you get great wealth, it's a burden because the temptation is to stop thinking about others and start thinking about your peers and yourself, and worse still, keeping up with your peers. So keeping up with the Joneses is very, very difficult, and I know a number of people who haven't had great wealth but have had sufficient, who have tried to keep up with the Joneses and come very, very unstuck because of it, because they're trying to do something they can't actually afford, And the rich young man wasn't prepared to go as far as he needed to in order to follow Jesus. In Luke 16:13 and Matthew 6:24, Jesus says, "No person can serve 2 masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." Now notice, Jesus is not saying you should not have money. What he's saying is you can't serve God and money be your God. Yeah? And if it's running you, then look very carefully at where you are. Because if you're being faithful to God, money won't run you. It really won't. And in Matthew 6:19 to 20, which should be here, I hope, somewhere. Yeah, Matthew 6:19 to 20. It says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where